Right, Shaun, thank you for joining us. For those of you that don't know, I'm speaking to Shaun Slabber from String IoT. This is just a quick shot interview to sort of get a feel for what this COVID-19 thing means to the rest of the world. We've been engaging with a few partners around South Africa and also international, and yeah, just to see what IoT means for the world going forward, and if this indeed is seen as the sort of secret weapon that we required for IoT, or whether it's actually something bad. Personally, I think it might actually be what we needed in terms of remote working and getting a sort of a digital twin on this side of things. But yeah, let's start. So Shaun, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. If you can do a quick introduction as to who you are and what you do, and then we can take it from there.
Definitely. Thank you very much for having me on. It's always good to share ideas and knowledge on these kind of platforms and share with the broader community. Shaun Slabber from String IoT. We're a very small boutique IoT-driven business, which look at kind of like solving clients' problems with the introduction of digital solutions for them. So, and yeah, I think, as you mentioned, I think this is definitely a very interesting times that we're in at the moment, and obviously comes with a whole lot of challenges, not only for people themselves and their families, but I think also for business and how there's a shift happening at the moment, and I think there's definitely a shift happening, and I've always been a firm believer that in order for people to shift their minds to a new way of thinking or a new process or a new place, you would require a event or some sort of a disaster. I think a very good example of that was in Cape Town, where we had, obviously with the water crisis, and everybody all of a sudden understood what crisis meant and how that impacted on their lives, and there was mass adoption of all of the water principles. And I think something very similar is going to happen within the Internet of Things industry as a whole, with the embracing of that whole process. So I definitely do agree with you. There is definitely a shift in the direction of where the industry is moving, and a broader embracement of the technologies. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, the funny thing is I mean, for me as a hardware provider, the first two things I saw already pop up this week was, one of them was, how can we sort of track people in terms of who's doing the self-isolation thing and who is not. And although it's great ideas in principle, there's a lot of I sort of think human elements that we need to sort of address with that sort of tracking of people. Privacy is one of them, but then there is some sort of other or applications that came to light, which was a bit more indirect, but would make sense in the future. I mean, you've seen applications whereby people want to see if a bin, like your trash can or your garbage bin, is full. Now it's not a case of efficiency anymore, but to mitigate a risk, and only to send people in to come check if bins are full when they actually got a notification that a bin is full. One of the other applications that I saw for this sort of thing was having automatic vehicle license plate recognition to see who's actually been approved through vital services and who is not, to try and again mitigate people standing on the roads and getting or being put at risk of being infected. So yeah, what sort of systems have you seen, or have you got any sort of requests in that regard?
So yeah, I think it's been interesting. Obviously, some of the things that's come through at the moment, and like I think you touched on a very vital, is the location aspect has become very prevalent, and that's been a big question. And what we've actually been asked is very similar. Is like, how many people is in a certain space, to limit the amount of people in space. And I think, and that is obviously, it's the same thing but different, in the sense of, there's 100 square meters of office space, and within that space, someone with the virus or without the virus can safely operate within a certain perimeter from each other, which means that, you would not allow people into that space if there's a certain amount of people in there already. So that's one of the things that came through to us, and it's not the most far-fetched idea or concept. It's actually something very easily achievable. And I think, if you start delving a little bit deeper in the process, so we involved in a project that I'm not really allowed to say a hell of a lot about at this point in time, but there's a very interesting initiative happening down in Cape Town with a lot of tech entrepreneurs at the moment to kind of like address what is indeed going to be we all know the shortage in hospital beds are coming. So we involved in a project down in Cape Town and seeing where that's going to go. So that's definitely going to have some very interesting problems to solve. And I think it's all about, so obviously, is someone in the room? Is it active? Is it busy? And I think all of those aspects, but also when you start looking at obviously the environment and how healthy is that environment at any certain time. Obviously working closely with Nero and some of their products that they have, obviously the environment is starting to play a big role in obviously from a health facility perspective and how healthy that space is. So there's definitely been a lot of inquiries around that aspect. And I actually do find it quite interesting. You mentioned the license plate recognition. That's a very, very interesting aspect. We initially actually introduced it to one of the big corporates to have an automated process for their building on arrivals, where your client or yourself or the employees are pre-registered on the system, which was a very novel and nifty idea. But all of a sudden, as you mentioned, that system that was initiated for something else is completely repackaged into something completely different to assist with that process. And I think that is a lot of where the thinking is happening, is like where we thought we are designing something for a very specific niche market, all of a sudden that's changing 100% and repackaging it and actually putting it available for a completely different use. And I think there's a lot of that happening at the moment. So I won't say there's a lot of, complete out-of-the-box thinking just yet. A difference, if I can say that, to basically say, we're going to repackage something and repurpose it for a completely different use. I think that's definitely a lot happening at the moment.
Yeah. So what I was saying was it's one of those situations where it's a little too late, and it's pretty much like the medical systems around the world as well. Now that the crisis has hit, now we realize that we need more. So everybody's asking me now, can we have it? Can we have it? Can we have it? And I mean, if you know the situation in South Africa, sorry, we're in lockdown for 21 days. Now there is talks of this being changed in the future where IoT will definitely form part of essential services. And then we would be allowed to then solve these sort of issues. But right now, it's unfortunately, we're still in the uptake of IoT and people not quite understanding what the benefits are. So yeah, it's very interesting to see these sort of things coming through. Then another question that quite interests me with regards to IoT and the sort of economy. I mean, everybody's economies right now is taking a knock and being pulled through the wire. How vital do you see, especially with the Moody's rating and things now, how vital do you see IoT playing a role in boosting the economy after all of this is over, with regards to COVID or with regards to just in general, the way and the trend we were heading on anyway for 2020?
Yeah, I think, Johann, that's it's not an easy answer. I think the big aspects that we need to look at is number one is, and I think what's, the first thing is we start talking about efficiencies. How do we things do better, faster, quicker? And that IoT is going to play a lot of role in that. And I think in the South African context, we've got a very unique, very unique problems compared to the rest of the world. And we do interesting balancing acts, if I can say it that. But I think what we're going to have and what we're going to see is we are going to drive efficiencies, and a lot of the time people see that driving of efficiencies as becoming a negative impact on employment. But in actual fact, what's going to happen is we're actually going to drive, we're going to drive employment numbers down. But what we're going to do is we're going to, in the very same breath, going to create much more work where we're going to take employees and repurpose those employees, as I mentioned earlier, and literally make them smarter in different spaces. Because, ultimately, that's what it's all about, is ultimately taking someone and utilizing what they have in a more efficient way. And I think you mentioned something very simplistic, about cleaning the bins, let's say for argument's sake, and I'm going to just use a bathroom example, kind of like people need to go to a bathroom. You know that bathroom needs to be cleaned after 50 or 100 cleans, but that traditionally someone would have stood there and made sure that bathroom is clean all the time. But now you can go do a physical measurement and say, right, after 15 times, send someone. And you're still going to need the cleaner. You're still going to need someone in that space in order to function and fulfill that role. But they're going to have time to kind of do other things within that space, because they're not going to need to stand there and kill time. So we're going to have a smarter workforce rather than a reduced workforce. So we're going to be able to deploy our workforce to different places so they can be more effective and all contribute much more to the bottom line of a business. And I think that's ultimately the big shift needs to sit. And I do believe that's where a lot of that's going to go.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, it's definitely a case of reskilling. We've already seen it with some of the mines and with some of the guys employ or adopting IoT is they would actually, part of the sort of solution is to train their people up on the hardware and software. So the same people do not get necessarily replaced, but they get upskilled, which is both good for the companies themselves and for the individual himself. I mean, everybody, we know education in this country is a big thing. So it all works towards the same goal, which is exactly what we need. So sort of last comments, what would you say is what will this COVID thing mean for the country going forward? And do you think it actually accelerated the adoption of IoT or not?
I think, and I'm a bit of a glass half full kind of guy, but I do believe that I think being the eternal optimist, I do see that obviously, the impact of this disaster is going to be quite detrimental on the economy, etc. But all of those things set aside, we have to look at the upside. And I've been trying to utilize my little soapbox and standing my soapbox and try to preach that just because we're locked in and we're sitting in these closed environments, our homes, home offices, reshifted the kitchen table, the dining room table, wherever you've made your desk, it's a realization that it is actually business as normal. Nothing has changed. Only thing that's changed is your environment. That's it. But we should continue to strive to do what we do. And in order to do a lot of that, we need to start embracing some of these Internet of Things aspects. And it's literally just becoming a shift in mind. And it's not necessarily going to mean that, our worlds are going to end. It's just we're going to have to change how we do things. Whatever I thought was the normal thing to do is just I'm going to have to shift that thinking. And it's going to change a little bit. And I think this is the perfect opportunity to start shifting that thinking, to start digitizing your business in a way that would not only benefit you as the owner of a business potentially, but also the employees. And I mean, it is a very, very important aspect to talk about, that upskilling. Upskilling is key in this process. And we need to go back to basics of understanding that it is not just good enough to go to work and just be there. You have to upskill yourself on a daily basis. And obviously we're working on a little project where it's all about kind of like bringing home to people the idea that, the Internet Things is not this big scary monster that's out there that's going to take over your world and Terminator, Skynet stuff. It's actually something that's there to enable the world around you, to make things simpler for you so you can focus on the things that matter. And I think that's a big part.
100%. So you've hit the nail on the head there, and you said that it's still business as usual and the work environment carries on. And funny enough, I had a call this week from a farmer that said, apparently I heard this IoT thing can help me. I no longer have the worker that can check if the borehole is running dry. Do you have something that can help me? And the funny thing about that is people just seem to need a push or an event like this to make them go look for solutions, because they already somehow know that there must be something else out there, but they needed the sort of motivation that what they're getting now to look into these things. So yeah, it might very well be the thing we need for IoT going forward.
No, it's definitely on. I think there's like what you're saying rings so true, because all of a sudden people have a little bit of a quiet moment, a perceived quiet moment to reflect on how they do things and how they tackle things. And I think now is a perfect time to start feeding people with what it can really do for us. And I think that's where the magic lies in this whole process, is just giving people the opportunity to see what is really out there and what can be done. And I mean, that farmer, his world is going to completely change and revolutionize the moment he can start understanding that he can see when his pump is running dry from his chair, in his lounge, in the morning, before he's even gotten out the door. He doesn't have to risk it in the middle of the night to trek 5 kilometers to go and switch off the pumps. It is something that simplistic that can make, it's the difference between him being alive or not, him continuing his operation or not. And I think, it is here. People will embrace it, and this is the start of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Shaun. Thanks for joining us today. Running a bit short in time. I will put the links in the description as well, so everybody can find you guys, your website, everything. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, Johann. Always great talking to you and bouncing ideas off you. And thanks for the opportunity, and chat soon again.
Cheers.